Good morning, folks. If we could ask you to put your video on, just your screen, so we can see you at least just to say hello at the beginning, be great.
And then to keep it on for the whole time. Thank you. Or we will kick you off, won't we, Kevin?
Yeah. And I forgot to ask, will somebody be monitoring chat while I'm speaking?
Yes, we will. I can, Kevin, if there are questions or however you want to do it, I can mention the chat and answer, mention questions to you as we go. How does that sound?
Okay.
Hi, Starge and Emma, I can see your faces there.
Oh. Good morning. Morning.
See you, long time no see.
That colour suits you, Stodge. That colour, they're really good. The orange, the pink, and the yellow.
PPE. Thank
nice.
you. Yeah, we wear
Very
it
nice.
for breast cancer
Fridays
awareness. Yeah.
Oh dear, is that for Fridays or for any time?
Yeah. No, you can wear it any time. But yeah, our
Very
team
good.
wears the pink PPE every Friday, and we
cool.
drop in a gold coin at the end of the year. We donate all the coins to breast cancer.
Fantastic. I like that.
Yeah.
Anthony, see you there?
Gordon looks like he's swimming with a shark. Gordon, there's something behind you. It's a big jaws, I think.
Yeah, it closes out the lounge room. I'm on afternoon shift.
Oh, jeez.
Funny.
I love these backgrounds. Okay, we'll give it one more minute, folks, and then we will kick off. We're so pleased that we've got Kevin, who is coming from St. Louis, Missouri. It's the day before, so don't tell him what happens for the rest of the next 24 hours, but he's behind us. Okay.
Hey, Jacob, put your camera on. And Robert Tomlinson. Old friends here, we want to see you. Early
Okay.
Perth people, steady.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we will kick off and we will let people join as they do. Good morning, folks. Good morning, wherever you are. If I could ask, just to put in the chat, where you're coming from, where it is in Australia or New Zealand or wherever it is around the world, just put it in the chat now. As I said, we are super pleased to have the next speaker with us. Kevin is a keynote speaker that we have worked with many years ago. Sorry, can I ask if you're not speaking, just to put on mute? Just there seems to be a bit of background noise. Okay, fantastic. Kevin is a keynote speaker that we had a few years ago, and we're so pleased to bring him back. You're going to really enjoy it. For those of you that haven't already, please join the community network, the Mainstream Community Network. I will put a link in the chat so you can see it if you haven't already joined. Kevin's presentation, as well as many others, amazing sessions that have been going for the last 9 months, will be on there. Have a look. There's lots of stuff on there, so please check it out if you haven't already. We'll put up the link. But this morning, we are pleased we've got Kevin Desrosiers, who is coming from St. Louis, Missouri. As I said, you're going to be in for a real treat this next 75 to 90 minutes. Kevin worked in the maintenance and engineering reliability field for 35 years. He doesn't look that old. I don't think he really did. But he's also a professional speaker and has given presentations both in person and online globally and with us at Mainstream. He's a two-time distinguished Toastmaster, so you'll not be surprised to hear that he's a great speaker. And he's the president of the chapter of the St. Louis, Missouri National Speakers Association. He's also currently writing a book on the art of public speaking. I need some lessons on that will be published by the end of the year. Today, he's going to share with you several tips from technical people on how to grab your audience's attention, whoever that might be, above or below, and get your call to action. So without further ado, hand over to you, Kevin. Enjoy for the next 75 minutes to an hour, folks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And I shared the wrong screen, so let me just unshare. Go. Now, do you remember the last time you had to do a presentation either to a group of people or to an individual where you had to win them over to your way of thinking? Did you maybe stumble a little bit? Have trouble saying what you wanted to say? Maybe you didn't know what to say to begin with. It doesn't have to be that way. There are a lot of simple things you can do that will help you grab your audience's attention, keep it, and get your call to action. And this is especially useful for technical people, so that's what I want to focus on a lot today. So what I will be covering is the following. How to select your speaking style. This is important. We have to have our own style. I will talk about the 5 basic steps in grabbing your audience's attention. Then we will move on to 6 nuances in public speaking, the finer points, things that you can do that will set you apart from the rest of the crowd. And then how to adapt to your audience. How do you present the different types of people so you can keep their attention and get them to listen to you? And then we'll have room at the end for questions, although you can questions in the chat as you go, and Ian will interrupt me as we go along so we don't lose track of what you want to talk about. But there are a lot of things we will cover today. I will be presenting a copy of my slides in PDF format, so you don't have to write down everything I have on my slides. But if there are things above and beyond the slides you want to remember and you don't want to listen to the whole recording, you might want to jot a few notes as you go along. So first, I want to talk about selecting your speaking style, because that is important. A lot of people look at somebody and say, wow, I want to talk like Tony Robbins, or I want to be like Simon Sinek, or whoever you like. And you don't have to be that way. You need to select a speaking style that fits your personality, that matches you. And what I would suggest to you is that there isn't one right style, and you don't have to copy other people. What you do need to do is be true to yourself and talk to people the way you would normally talk. Talk the way you're comfortable talking. If you're excitable like me and you get all, excited as you talk and you start talking really fast, great, do that. If you're a slower talker and want to talk slow and methodical, do that too. I like to talk about a song by Eric Clapton that some of you or many of you have heard of. He has a song called Layla. And back when I was growing up, it was one of the most popular songs around. And it was hard driving rock and roll. It was fast and it was to the point. But in the late 90s, he came out with an album called Unplugged. And he did Layla in acoustic guitar format. A lot of people love that as well. So it's the same song, the same lyrics, but 2 completely different styles of delivery. Both were successful. So you don't have to necessarily have one style or another to be successful. You have to have a style that fits your personality and fits what you're comfortable with. And what I like to do is I speak and see other people speak. I watch them and learn from them. And what do I mean by that? I will watch a speaker and I will jot down the things that they're doing that I like. And I may try that the next time I speak. I also jot down the things I don't like and don't want to try and make sure I don't do that. Because sometimes you can learn just as much by finding habits you don't want to copy as you can by observing habits that you do want to copy and do want to put into your speaking style. So it works both ways. Observe other people as you speak and see what they do well, see what you like, try it. If after you speak it works, use that style or incorporate that in your style. If it doesn't, go back to what you had. And at the same time, find things you don't want to try that you see people use and say, that isn't me, or that wouldn't work for me, or I don't like that. I don't want to be that type of speaker. So you have to first find your own style of speaking. Now we'll talk about a few basics, 5 basics in grabbing your audience's attention. And the first is you have 30 seconds to grab the audience's attention. There are studies at Harvard and several other places that have said you have between 20 and 30 seconds before people decide if they want to listen to you or not. So you have to make every second count at the beginning. You notice I didn't begin by saying, hi, I'm Kevin DeRocher. I do this, I do that. People do not need to hear that. You need to get into the meat of your presentation right away. And what do I mean by the meat of your presentation? What's in it for me? Or as some people say, with them. We're a selfish society. People nowadays are more interested in what they're going to get out of something than they are in other people. It's sad to say, but that is what our society is becoming. So you want to get to the what's in it for me immediately. What did I do when I started speaking today? I asked about a time you recently presented, and I asked about how you felt. Were you uncomfortable? And what you felt as you did that. And I made you feel a little bit uncomfortable for that, but I told you what you will get out of this presentation right away, right up front. That way you say, you know what? I need that. Or maybe you decided you didn't. Sometimes you can have people in the audience say, you know what? I'm already a great speaker. I don't need to hear this person. And you tune me out. And that's fine too. But you want to capture the audience, the people's attention that will be interested in what you're saying. And by attending today, I'm assuming that you are interested in becoming a better speaker and elevating your speaking to that next level. And in your call to action, include that what's in it for me. And your call to action is at the end of your speech. When you want somebody to do what you're presenting, you want them to do something as a result of what they heard, you want to make sure you tell them what they will gain by taking that call to action you have. And what I mean by that is I may say, if you incorporate these steps that I talked about today, you will become a better speaker, start closing more deals, and get more reaction from your audience, or get what you need in the way of a business or personal life, because the skills I'm teaching you today aren't all for business. You can use these in your personal life too when talking to anybody. So don't limit what you're hearing today to just as you're speaking at work or in a business proposition. During your presentation, ask questions. And that is a way to keep the audience involved. Some questions might be, have you ever? Or start with, have you ever? Would it interest, shock, or amaze you, or surprise you to know? And how often have you felt, thought, or experienced? And I will talk about that a little bit more when I'm talking about how to discuss with the different types of people in the workplace. But for example, have you ever felt discouraged or frustrated when you went out to the plant floor and saw equipment that was down and wondered, when is this going to be running again? Or will it even ever run efficiently again? And what you're doing is you're getting that person thinking. And you don't have to ask questions they have to answer. They can be rhetorical questions. So you want to ask questions that will keep the audience engaged, and do these throughout your presentation, because as you ask these questions, now you're getting them thinking and you're getting them on the same page rather than having them just listening the entire time. Occasionally, it's good to ask a question that has to be answered and you wait for somebody in the audience to answer. But a rhetorical question will work the same way. A question where you ask it, you pause a few seconds, let people think about it, and then move on. This one's a little controversial, but I like to make people feel pain. How did you feel when? Or do you ever want to experience whatever that may be again? Do you lose sleep worrying about? And I don't have one more, so I'm going to go back a screen. And I did this in the beginning with you also. I brought you into a time when you were having to present, and I made you feel a little bit of pain. I made you remember some uncomfortable moments when you were doing a presentation. And by doing this, what you do is you give yourself the chance to come in as that knight in shining armor and solve their problems. So when you're presenting to a manager, or you're presenting to operations, or you're presenting to somebody that you want to do something, that you're take action on something you're presenting about, make them feel like, yes, I need a solution for them. Make them realize they have a problem, and don't get really mean with it or rough, but make them realize they have a problem with their efficiency. They have problems with the quality. They have problems keeping employees. They have problems training employees, safety issues, whatever it may be. Make them realize they have a problem. And then you come in with your next statement telling them that you have a solution for them and tell them how they can solve that problem. You also want to set up the journey. And I did this at the very beginning. I told you what you would gain by listening. I told you you would gain some skills. I told you would get the 5 basics. I told you would get 6 nuances. And I told you I would talk about the different groups of people that you present to and how that differs and how you can talk to different types of people. I told you how hard it will be. I told you you're going to get some simple things that you can start using right away. So you knew when you can expect results. There's some things in here you can use right away. There's some things that are going to take some time and practice, but you know that you're going to have varying levels of need as far as learning how to do these things. I outlined my presentation. I told you step by step where we would go throughout this presentation. I told you you wouldn't need anything special unless you wanted a few notes other than what was in my slides, because I told you I was going to provide a PDF of the slides that can be distributed afterwards. That way you don't take a bunch of useless notes that I'm already going to provide to you in a PDF. And that's a good question that somebody might ask right off the bat in a presentation. Will you be providing a PDF of your slides when you're finished if your presenter doesn't do that? So you don't unnecessarily take notes. And will it be interactive? I told Ian, people can ask questions in chat, and I told Ian, go ahead and feel free to interrupt me. So when there are questions, we get them when they're timely, as opposed to waiting to the very end. And maybe we forgot the context of when the questions were asked, and we don't get as good of answer as we possibly could have gotten. So you want to set up the journey for people as they're moving along. So in the 5 basics, I'm going to give you the summary. You have 30 seconds, so make every word count. Don't waste it with things like, oh, I've been speaking to all these people and I did this and I did that. I is the most overused word in the English language or in just about any language. You want to make sure you are focusing on what's important to the customer. And you do that by getting into what is in it for them. You keep them engaged throughout your presentation by asking questions. You evoke some pain, not in a mean way, but then you swoop in to save the day. And you set up the journey so people know where they're going throughout your presentation. People like to know where they're heading. They like to understand. And one thing I'll use as well, too, when I'm the last speaker of the day, or if I'm right before lunch, part of my setting up the journey is I know I'm the only thing between you and lunch, or I'm the only thing between you and the end of the day. I promise you, we will get out on time. Well, why did I do that? Because I want them to know that I am committed to ending on time. I don't want them looking at their watch and saying, oh gosh, I wonder if he's going to end on time. Because if they're thinking about that, they're thinking, I have to get out of here right at 10 a.m. or whatever time they have to get out at. I don't want them preoccupying their mind with things like that, or I'm hungry, I want to get to lunch. I want to reassure them so they're completely focused on my presentation. That way, you can make sure you get the most out of your presentation and your audience gets the most out of your presentation. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Do we have any questions yet? Okay, we'll move on.
I haven't seen any unless there
Okay.
is. Put them in now.
Okay, we'll go into the nuances, and if questions pop up, please feel free to jump in and let me know, Ian. So there's several nuances in public speaking. These are fine points that a lot of people don't know about. And if you learn a few of these, it will set you apart from other people. You'll become a better speaker. And they're subtle and very small differences in how you speak, but they go a long way in your speaking journey. First is don't be afraid of using a blank screen. A blank screen brings the attention back to you. Because if I have bullets up here the entire time, people a lot of times will be reading the bullets as opposed to paying attention to me. And I don't want them focusing on what's on the screen unless it's something I need them to look at. I want them focusing on what I have to say. So you can use a blank screen when you're talking about things that you don't need a slide for. So I might put up a blank screen right now and continue to talk about that, because what happens when there's nothing on a screen, especially if I'm live, you're looking at me instead of the screen and trying to read the bullets. And not only do you use a blank screen occasionally, and you might use it in between bullet points, you might have several blank screens inserted, but make sure you aren't reading your bullets. When you have several bullets up there and they say exactly what you're going to talk about, people are going to read that rather than listen to you. So you notice I have bullet points in my presentation, but you can't get my entire presentation out of just the bullets unless you've either heard the conversation or you've taken notes. So you want to make sure that you leave enough blanks. Blanks mean either a blank screen or just enough for you to know what you're talking about or your audience to know where they're at with the bullet point, and then expand on that, or just take the bullet completely away. So now the focus is completely on you, because that's where it should be when you're speaking. It shouldn't be on external things.
Kevin, just to jump in, we've got a question from Ben H. How do you
Sure.
know what things you need a slide for? Or can you get away with a blank screen instead?
For me, I very rarely use slides unless I'm on Zoom, because I know what I'm going to say, and I don't like using slides. But in a presentation like this in Zoom, where I've got a large audience and I don't know where everybody's from, and I want to reassure people I'm going to have a PDF available for you, I have that. If you are comfortable speaking without slides, by all means do it, because slides are hard to handle. Number one, people like to focus on those rather than you. Two, something can always go wrong with slides. And if it can, for some reason, it will. The third thing I don't like as much about slides is people tend to turn around and not face the audience and read back at the slides. If I don't have slides, I tend to look at the audience more. Now, if you're on a big stage, you have monitors in front of you, floor monitors, where you're on the stage and you'll have 2 or 3 floor monitors. So as you're walking around the stage, right down there in front of you, you've got a big screen that tells you what's on your slide. And it's on a big screen behind you as well. But if you don't need slides, I encourage you not to use them. So slides can be good, especially if you have graphics you need to show. People learn various ways. People learn by listening, they learn by doing, and they learn by seeing. And for the people that learn by seeing, sometimes slides are good. If you know your audience is a visual learning crowd, and especially if there are graphics that illustrate it well, I would have slides then. And maybe you just have it for the graphics as opposed to the words. But I personally, unless I have a lot of graphics, I will not use too many slides. I'll use an occasional slide, but I want the focus on me. And especially if I'm presenting live, I minimize the slides and use a lot of blank screens. Does that answer your question?
I think
take
his
that as
silence
yes
means
from
yes.
the-
Silence
Okay.
means yes, Kevin.
Yeah. You know, and the other thing, and this brings itself into another question that gets asked a lot of times too. I speak from an outline. I do not memorize my presentations. Most of my keynotes are 40 minutes. And when I memorize a keynote, I just don't get as genuine. Or if I get lost, I get flustered. If I have an outline that I follow, it's a lot less likely that I'll get lost. But you have to, once again, find your own speaking style, like we said in the basics or before the basics. You have to have your own style. Some people are more comfortable memorizing their presentation word for word. Others prefer an outline. I don't encourage you to completely speak off the cuff. I speak off of an outline in my presentation because I know what I'm talking about. When I talk about you focused, if I talked about this slide 10 times over the next 10 days, it would be very, very similar to what it was each of the 10 days. The words would vary slightly, but the content would be the same. You don't want to just speak off the cuff. You want to understand what you're going to say with each bullet point, with each slide, if you're just doing bullet points. So slides versus not slides, outline versus memorizing, that's a personal preference. You have to figure out what works best for you and is best for you. What do I mean by you focus? And that's YOU. I talked about it before. You want to eliminate as many I statements as possible. People see you as self-centered and don't listen to you as much. And even in your examples, you don't want to say, I spoke in front of 10,000 people. I did this, I did that. Now try to teach you about being a better public speaker. You don't want the audience to put you on that pedestal. You want the audience to see you as one of them. Maybe one is a little bit more polished. You want them to see you as an expert, see you as polished, but you want them to understand you have made some mistakes in the past as well, and you have learned. So you want your audience to say, you know what? He did it. I can get there as well. Or she did it. I can do it too. So you don't want to put yourself up on that pedestal. You want to establish yourself as an expert, but you don't want to be the hero of your story. The other thing is you want to be talking to your audience as individuals. And this is where the you and you focus comes in. In the very beginning, when I opened, I said, do you remember the last time you had to give a presentation? And I went on from there. That is significantly different in understanding as opposed to have any of you. I do not say have any of you. If I say have any of you, you interpret that as I'm talking to the entire audience. If I say, have you ever, subtle change in words, but now people feel like I am talking to them individually. They see that as, hey, this speaker is talking to me, and you're more apt to answer that rhetorical question. You're more apt to participate if I ask for people to participate. So you definitely want to be you focused and say, have you, as opposed to have any of you. Subtle word change, but huge in how the audience interprets what you're saying. Eye contact is important as well. And some people think they have to have eye contact with everybody in the room. No, you don't have to have eye contact with everybody in the room. You do need to make sure you talk to all parts of the room, or if it's just one person or two or three people, you make appropriate eye contact. So what I like to do is I find friendly, if it's a large audience, I find friendly faces in the audience. I'll find some on the right side near the front, in the middle near the front, on the left near the front, then near the middle on each of those sides, and then in the back. And I'll rotate randomly around those. But I will look for something that is engaged with me. I'm not going to look for the person that's scowling, although occasionally I'll look for that person that maybe is playing with their cell phone or they're looking down. And once I see them, they look up at me and all of a sudden they sit up straight and start listening. But I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, so I don't do that too often. But I will occasionally take on that challenge and try to find somebody. But I'm looking for the friendly faces, so the people that are engaging. And now I am making that eye contact as opposed to looking up and over the crowd. I want the audience to see I am looking at people in the crowd. And if it's a smaller audience, especially if there's a key stakeholder, let's say you're presenting to a plant manager, general manager, whatever you want to call them, you're presenting to an operations manager or whoever your message is geared towards. You want to have most of your eye contact with them, but not too much that they feel uncomfortable. Maybe 60, 70% of your eye contact should be with your key client if you have a key client in the room, somebody that is a decision maker, somebody that you're trying to persuade. But if you're trying to persuade the whole group, do it evenly throughout. But if there is a key stakeholder of some sort in the room, give them maybe 60, 70% max attention. If you go much above that, then they're going to feel uncomfortable, like you're staring at them. So you want to make sure you don't make them fidget in their seats. And if you see them look a little bit uncomfortable, give them a little bit less eye contact. And randomly rotate between them. Don't just go front left, middle, front right, middle, center, left, back right, middle, left. Rotate around in a random order. Start wherever you want, but move around a little bit. And it's the same with moving on the stage. And I believe we have something on movement in here, so I'll wait for that. If not, I'll talk to moving as well. Next slide. Move with purpose. Have you ever seen somebody that's just pacing back and forth on the stage, and they're talking as they're pacing, and they're just wearing out a spot in the carpet or in the floor, and it's just the same thing, back and forth, back and forth. And all of a sudden, they're like a metronome. You just see them going back and forth. And that's all you're paying attention to, is them going back and forth. You want to move with purpose. So try not to move. And in a small room, this doesn't work. But if you're in a larger room, it does. Move with a purpose. If you're in a large room, a great way to do this is when you're making a point, stand in one spot. When you finish making that point, pause, slowly walk to another spot, then start your next point. What does that do? That gives the audience a couple clues. First, it gives them time to digest what you just said, because you're transitioning to a new point. It gives them a cue that you are transitioning to something different by being quiet and walking to another spot on the stage or on the platform. And it also gives you time to recompose just a little bit. It gives your visual learners a time to associate a spot on the stage with what you're saying. So if I talk about moving with purpose from one spot on the stage, and then I move to another spot on the stage and I talk about eye contact, I can do a visual recall for the visual learners later by pointing to the spot on the stage where I talked about moving with purpose, pointing to the other spot on the stage where I talked about how to make eye contact. And the visual learners will absorb what you're learning a little bit better because they associate that spot you're pointing to with what you said when you were there. Now, the non-visual learners won't pick up on that, but if you just take that 10, 15, 20% of your audience that's a visual learning audience and help enhance their experience with you, and supplement the auditory learners, now you've reached more of your audience. So it can be used to create markers and signal transitions, as I said before. And it can set up that visual recall that I just talked about. So moving around the stage helps the people know, one, it's a transition. Two, it helps the visual learners. Three, gives you time to recompose. Another thing that you can do when you're moving around the stage as well is you can make sure at that point that you are reaching every part of the audience. So you may, if it's a large crowd, you can get to the left side of the room. You can get to the middle side or the middle portion of the room, the right side of the room, because you want to get a little bit closer to each section of the room. Now, in a small room, you're limited on where you can move, but you want to make sure you are not blocking the slides if you're using slides for anybody that's in the room. You want to, and if you're on a big screen and you can possibly block that, if there's a projector, you don't want to be blocking the screen. So when you move, your positioning is important so you don't block what's being projected if you have something that is being projected. So you have to take that into account as well. And if I have a screen and it's a tight room, usually I have enough room to speak for a little bit on the right side of the screen, pause after I finish a point, walk in front of the screen, cross over to the other side of the screen, start a new point there. And now I have moved to that side of the room, that side of the conference room, that side of the table in the conference room, whatever it may be. And now I'm connecting better with each of the audiences. The one thing I caution you on, though, on moving is do not get too close to the audience. If you have chairs in front of you, you're not up on a stage, and you move in somebody's comfort zone, and by their comfort zone, I mean within 3 feet of somebody, unless you have no choice in that room. I had a speaker that he got talking and he came up right in front of me, right in front of my knees as I was sitting in a chair in the front row. I always like to sit in the front row. And he invaded my personal space and he was talking about me, pointing to me. And I felt offended by that. That is my space. Give the person in the audience their space. Unless you're in a conference room, you have no room to move around. You have no choice. They understand that. But give the person space when you're moving. Don't invade their privacy. Give them that their own space, that 3-foot buffer in front of them. The power of pausing. I get talking really fast at times, and I'll get going. I'll start talking about pausing, and I'll say, "You don't have to pause," blah, blah, blah. And you can't keep up with me because I get excited about what I talk about at times. So how do you counter that? You pause. And it allows the audience to catch up with you. It gives you time to catch up with what I'm saying, to digest what I just said. And this is especially important after you make a key point. After I talk about the power of the pause, I'm not going to immediately go into my next slide. I will pause and give you time to jot a few notes, to think about that, and to digest what I just said. Because if I talk too fast and go on to the next point, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to forget what I just said and start trying to listen to what I'm starting to say, or you are going to be trying to remember what I just said, jot down notes about that, and you are going to miss what I'm starting on my next point. So you want to make sure that you pause often enough for the audience to keep up with you. And even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable, a lot of times after I say something, I will just in my head go 1001, 1002, 1003, and then I will move on. Or after a major point, I may count to 5 and give them plenty of time for something that is especially important to sink in, for them to grasp it. Because it's important that they absorb as much as possible about what you say. And you want to give your audience every possible opportunity to learn from what you say, to succeed from what you're doing. And it gives the audience time to fill in the blank. If you ask a question of the audience, when I said, "Do you remember the last time you had to give a presentation to a group of people or to an individual?" I paused. I gave you time to think, when did I do? Oh, yeah, that was last year or last week or whenever I gave this presentation. Then I'll say, how did it feel? Were you frustrated at all? And now I pause long enough for that frustration to sink in. Once again, going back to what I talked about earlier, feeling a little bit of pain. Those pauses give the audience time to feel about what you're saying, to understand what you're saying, to join you in the scene. They actually enter the presentation with you by remembering that presentation and using that presentation as their presentation as part of today's presentation, because now they're visualizing, and in their head, they've painted a picture of that presentation. You don't want to paint too vivid of a picture of that presentation, because that may not be the picture in their minds. It may be a picture of a small room with just 2 people. It may be a picture of a room with 1,000 people. It may be a picture of a room with 10 people. Let them picture what they want. Because if you say, and you're in a room with 10 people, and well, I never speak to 10 people, you tune the person out. So you say something like that, you pause, you let them paint that picture and join you in your presentation. Am I making sense so far?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. I hope so. And this is hard for me, but admit your mistakes. And this is especially for somebody in maintenance. I was in maintenance for 35 plus years, maintenance or reliability engineering. If you make a mistake, admit it as early as possible. And I'm taking this straight from what I consider to be the greatest book ever written. I don't get any commission if you go out and buy it. It's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was written in the 1930s. And to me, it is the greatest book ever written. It tells you how to work with people, how to get along with people. And when you admit your mistake early, it keeps people from piling on. You'd be surprised when I go to a production manager, I'm in a meeting and say, we did this last month and we let you down. We told you we'd have the line back to you in 4 hours. It took us 6. I am so sorry for that. Here's what happened. Here's what we're doing to make sure it does not happen again. You want to do that because now a lot of times, most of the time, they will start saying, well, Kevin, we understand. We get that. You told us then. But if you don't admit that mistake, somebody in the room is going to say, well, Kevin, last month I gave you my production line. You told me it'd be 4 hours and you didn't get it back to me for 6 or 8 or whatever it is. And it didn't run well when it started. If you admit your mistakes right up front, you're honest about them, and you truly research why you made that mistake and tell them what your plan is not to repeat that mistake, you will have a better chance of getting that call to action that you're looking for. And you will have a better chance of your audience listening to you and giving you that production line or whatever it is you're looking for. If you're looking for budgetary funds, if you're looking for some time to work on something, or if you're looking for somebody to create some PMs for you or to give you some documentation or whatever it may be, if you want them to accept a bid for something, you have a better chance if you admit you're human and tell them, here's why I don't think it's going to happen again. So summarizing the nuances, sometimes blank screen is extremely powerful. Use it because, especially if it's a live presentation, it takes the focus off of the screen and puts it on you. And where it's even more powerful, and I didn't bring this up when I was talking about it, if you're in a small conference room and you've got a projector as opposed to a TV, and you got that bright light, I'll tell you, when you're looking at the audience, that bright light is distracting to you and it's distracting to the audience. But putting that blank screen up there, you don't have that bright light shining in the room and the heat generated by that bright light as well. So if you have that blank screen, it is a lot better. Be you focused. You want to talk about your audience and talk directly to them, not have you ever, have any of you ever. It's have you ever. So people feel like you're talking to them one-on-one, that you're talking to them individually, because that will bring up the interaction. That will make more people listen to you and talk to you. Use selective eye contact. You don't have to look at everybody in the room, and because your head's just going to be bobbing around and it's going to be moving all over. You want to find a few select people. If you're uncomfortable, focus strictly on the friendly people or the person you're trying that is the key decision maker in the room. But don't focus on them too much that you make them feel uncomfortable. And when you're moving, move with purpose. Use it to set up points for visual recall. Use it to get closer to a certain part of the audience so each part of the audience feels that you have come and joined them and become part of them. And sometimes if you're in a room, you can walk into the crowd. I caution you a little bit about that because If you're walking down the aisle, if there are chairs and there's an aisle in there, then a lot of people are looking at your backside. And unless you have a good microphone system, a lot of times your voice will tail off, and you don't want that to happen. And people in the front are not going to generally turn around and see you, especially if you're gesturing, if you're being a little bit animated. They're going to stay looking forward because it's uncomfortable for them to turn around in their seats. So be careful about going into the audience, but sometimes it's good, especially if you have round tables, then it is good to move around the room just a little bit, but you have to be careful about that as well. Once again, it goes back to the beginning, establishing your own speaking style. If you're more comfortable staying in the front, staying close to a lectern or a podium, do that. Do what you're most comfortable with. Don't get too far out of your comfort zone, but push your comfort zone a little bit each time so you can start elevating your speaking level a little bit by trying something new. If it's not working, then just go back to what you were doing and work on it the next time. The power of the pause. It is really important to stop now and then and let things sink in. That way the audience can keep up with you, doesn't get confused, and doesn't miss your next point as you're starting on that, and they're still trying to digest what was being talked about before. And admit your mistakes. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And people, if you admit them up front, usually will not beat you up any further than that. And if anything, they'll start making excuses for you as to why you made the mistake. So take away some of that negative energy by being the first to point out that mistake. Although don't go too far with it. And the example I like to give is my dad built a screened-in patio in the back of our house when I was a kid. And it was beautiful. Loved it. But people would come over and they'd say, "Oh, wow, this is a beautiful patio. You did a great job." "Well, yeah, but that corner over there isn't perfectly square. And I got a couple of problems with that joint. I think it might leak a little bit." He went too far with that. So don't point out every flaw you had. And if you had a minor flaw and it's not impacting your client, your customer, don't worry about it. But if it is something that they notice that impacts them, bring it up. You don't want to nitpick yourself and make yourself look petty. And this is where I get into adapting to the different types of audiences that you have, because we talk to different types of people and you approach them differently. If I'm talking to the plant manager or to senior business executive, I'm going to talk differently than if I'm a maintenance supervisor, if I'm talking to my technicians, or if I'm talking to my manager, or if I'm talking to the operations manager or production supervisors. Now, all of these.
Kevin, can I just
Of
jump
course.
in? There's a question it's from Adam. How do you evoke pain without disengaging audiences due to uncomfortable mistakes your presentation highlights? Egos can be fragile.
Don't like to evoke the pain on a mistake that somebody made. So I am not evoking the pain about Ian messing up this or that, or even Kevin messing up this or that, myself messing up. I'm evoking pain about their metrics. Have you ever, struggled because production numbers aren't where the plant manager expects them to be, or your efficiencies are, or do you have trouble meeting your budget? Would you like to see your safety numbers improve, less lost time accidents? So I address things like that as opposed to things that are a little bit more personal. I address it to the metrics because what I want to do, and you'll see that when I talk about talking to different audiences, you want them to realize they have a problem in the metric you're trying to address when you're speaking to them. So, and it's not a metric that it's their fault. It's something that it's just something that you can help, being a maintenance professional or a reliability professional or whatever your expertise is. It doesn't necessarily have to be maintenance. It's anything that you're an expert on that you want to have the audience let you try to do for them. Does that answer your question well enough?
Does that answer your question, Adam? I think we say yes because we don't hear back.
Hi guys. Srini here from Brisbane. Ian and Kevin, can I ask a question on the last one?
Please.
Go for it.
Yep. I've been noticing that your presentations doesn't start with what I am going to cover. You always have as a summary what I have covered so far, which is a very good thing. So you're keeping in suspense what I'm going to say to you, but because usually in our organization, we start with the agenda. So this is the agenda. We're going to talk about these topics, and we say that, and we usually avoid having the summary in other people's slide also I have seen, but yours is a pretty good one, saying that you keep everyone in suspense and you have very limited agenda and say, hey, this is it. Sorry. Yeah. So I just noticed that.
If you were here through the beginning of my presentation, in the very beginning, I told you what I was going to cover. I told you that I was going to talk about creating your own speaking style or learning your own speaking style. Then I said I will talk about the 5 basic steps in the basics in being a better speaker. Then I said I would talk about the 6 nuances. And then I will talk about adapting to your audience. And then I would talk about, or I would have time for questions. So I did not want to put 5 points and the 6 points in the agenda because now people are going to say, oh, I know it all. I'm not going to listen. I told them the general heading of what I'm going to cover, but I didn't give them too much that they're going to say, I can just read the agenda and walk away and not worry about it. So I did tell them where we were going to beginning. That's one of my key points is you have to tell your audience where you're going in your presentation. But yeah, I thought I did cover that at the very beginning of the speech.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's really good. Like you covered only limited stuff because we used to put too many things. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay. And I like to do the summary at the end of each section too, because that way, if people miss something, now they can go back. They've got that one summary slide. They can get out their cell phone. They can take a picture of the summary slide. Or in your case, you're going to get the deck. Or if you can't wait, you can take a screenshot of what's here. It's, that's why I have the summary in there, because if I go and don't have that summary, I'm not giving you that time to digest. And that is time for you to slow down, to pause and absorb what I just said. So as I'm going through that summary slide, it is allowing people to catch up and maybe catch something that they missed. So that's basically where I was going with that. Okay. And that answers your question adequately?
Thank you.
All good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. The tough one, senior management. They're always tough to talk to. And we talked about what's in it for me. You have to get to that right away with the senior manager. They need to know why you're talking to them. What am I going to gain by listening to you? And for them, it's the bottom line. It's how am I going to save money? How am I going to increase efficiency? How am I going to increase quality? How am I going to improve safety? How am I going to improve on my environmental record? They want to know what they will get out of what you're proposing. So you have to get to that immediately with senior management. You have to be brief. You can't give a long explanation. Now, be prepared with senior management to dig deeper, but give them the highlights. And if they ask questions, be prepared to answer those questions, but don't get into the weeds and tell them, well, we're going to connect this here. We're going to build this and this will do this. And it'll, you don't want to get too much into the details. You want to make sure you give them a high level picture of what you're doing and why it's going to help them. You want to be as non-technical as possible. Now, you also have to understand if you know that senior manager and they have a technical background, you can add a little bit of technical for them, but educate them on what you're doing, why it's going to work, why you're doing what you're doing. But most of it's going to be education as opposed to technical, because a lot of the senior managers did not come up through the technical ranks. They're not engineers. They weren't journeyman mechanics or electricians or plumbers or whatever. They do not understand what you're proposing as a maintenance person at the level that you do. And if you start talking about that, you're going to lose them. And you don't want to make them feel stupid. They want to feel smart. So tell them things they can understand. And if they want to ask the questions, let them ask the questions and then answer them. But you don't want to embarrass them by giving them things that they don't understand. And you don't want to bore them with the details. But they do want data. If we do this, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. It will take X hours. I expect this to have 10% improvement in throughput, whatever it may be. But be careful with that as well, because when we used to have projects, when I was in engineering and I was in maintenance, we would propose projects and we would say the ROI, the return on investment of this project will be 37%. And, because it's going to reduce this many man hours, it's going to save you this much money, and on down the line. The projects never did that. So I would always make sure I was conservative in that estimate, because people would give these numbers. They would know that the threshold for ROI was, let's say, 30%, and they would make sure their project was 37% or 40%. So it had a better chance of moving on to the next level or being approved. And they put the numbers in, but the numbers weren't that good. Be careful with your data and numbers, because what happened at my company near the end of my career is they came in and they said on a couple of projects, okay, you said it will be able to reduce my manpower by one person a shift. We're taking 3 people out of your budget next year. And they did that. So now the people that were giving inflated numbers or weren't careful about their numbers, they were losing those 3 people, and the project didn't deliver on that. Or if they said it's going to save you $10,000 a year in spare parts, they would take that out of the maintenance budget for spare parts. And now all of a sudden you're scrambling because it really didn't save that. Be careful of the data and the numbers you give senior management, because more and more senior managers are taking it straight out of your budget. And if possible, have an alternative. And I learned this when I first started working. I worked for Anheuser-Busch straight out of college. They made Budweiser. Back then, they were an independent company. Now they're owned by InBev, so it's Anheuser-Busch InBev. But I spent a year in a management training program, and they flew me out to the Los Angeles brewery. They were going to transfer me there, and the plant manager interviewed me. And he said, Kevin, what is the problem with this? I ask you a question, what should I do about this? And you say, here's what you should do. And I said, I don't know. Maybe explain it more. He says, no. He said, senior managers don't want to feel like you're forcing them into a solution. You want to give them a choice. You want to say, we can do this, which I feel is the best solution. And if there is no other real choice, or we can do nothing and we can continue to live with this while we explore another solution. Or here's a less expensive alternative that won't give you the same efficiency gains, but it will give you this. So if at all possible, don't try to back a senior manager into a corner and make them feel like they only have one choice coming out of that meeting. Try to give them an option if you can. Now, sometimes that's not possible, but if you can, give them that option so they feel like they're making a decision for themselves and you're not making the decision for them. You are serving as just an advisor. Production and operations managers. When I talk to them, once again, I get to the WIFM right away. And here, once again, I talk to financial, productivity, safety, environmental, and usually it's to address a problem they're having. So I talk about the problem that my solution is trying to address. I make them feel some pain about it. So I talk to them, hey, remember over the past 2 months, we've run under standard efficiency 30% of the time. And what I think I have here is something that will get us to the point where we maybe run under standard efficiency maybe 2% of the time or 4% of the time. I can't guarantee you we will never run under standard efficiency, but this will get us closer and closer to that. So you want to make sure you have them feel some pain, make them realize the problem they have and the problem you're trying to solve. We had an accident last week on this line, and I think we could have avoided it. This is what I think can help us solve that problem so we don't have this type of accident again. Address the potential risks and the mitigation. So if we do the solution, here are the risks of implementing this solution. We think it will cost X amount of dollars, but this is on preliminary bids. And we all know prices are going up. Shipping times are changing every day. This is today's prices, and they told me they could have it by X date. Once this gets approved, those may shift a little bit, but the vendor has told me they'll do their best to get it by this time at this price. If it does change, I will get back to you and let you know so you have a choice to change your mind, or we can adjust however necessary, or I have these alternate vendors I will try instead. So you want to make sure, especially when there's a time lag between your solution and implementation, let them know there are some risks. And if you've built in maybe a fudge factor for that risk in the project estimate or your estimate, or if it's something that goes right away, you maybe don't have to worry about that as much. But it could be also that we only have 2 people here capable of doing that. One of them's on vacation next week. And as long as that other one's here, we will do it. If they're sick or something, we can't do that. Or we're going to wait till both of them are here. So if something happens to one, they're busy on something else, we can guarantee we have another person that can do that. So you want to make sure they see that you're thinking about things that could possibly go wrong, and you have a plan to minimize the risk of something going wrong. And you want that clear plan. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's what we're going to do. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's how we will test it when we're complete. Make sure you have a testing plan. It's not just we're going to give it to you, turn on the switch. We will test it and make sure it works as planned. And we will monitor it for the first 48 hours, week, whatever that may be. And make sure you lay out that plan so they know that you have thought about everything that is going to happen in this project. And get them saying yes. And once again, this comes from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Start asking them questions where they say yes. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to worry about whatever it may be, and have them say yes? And then say, and wouldn't it be nice if we had a solution that would cost us under $1,000 as opposed to spending $10,000 on this? Yes. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get something done next week or today instead of waiting a month or 6 months from now? Get them saying yes. And once people start saying yes, when you get to that tougher question, they're in the habit of saying yes. And studies have shown, psychological studies, that they're more apt to say yes once they've gotten in the habit of saying yes. So ask them a bunch of questions where they say yes and agree with you on something. Do you like that plan? Yes. Do you think we've covered all the things that we should mitigate? Yes. And get them saying yes before you ask for your final and most important ask. If there is a slight risk, they'll say no for. But get them in the habit of saying yes, and use psychology on them, because it is proven that once somebody gets on that roll saying yes, it's easier for them to keep saying yes than to say no for something. It's a devious trick, and I'm not saying I'm always above ground. I will be devious, and I will use that psychological warfare if I need it to get something I need. Never said I'm perfect. Okay, if you're talking to your manager, this is usually a little bit easier, especially if you get along with your manager. You want to get to what's in it for him right away, or her, but you want to emphasize your departmental goals. You want to emphasize what the maintenance department is aiming for. And it could be, mitigating this problem we're having with production, improving goodwill, or helping production, helping our metrics, saving in spare parts costs, getting a tool that will help us do the job easier, reduce the time it takes to do jobs, get a work order system that's better than the one you have instead of managing on spreadsheets. I want to get a CMMS, computerized maintenance management system.
Kevin,
Yes.
can I jump in? There was a question coming from Marissa. I think
Yeah.
it was to the previous slide, or slightly more than it is
Yeah.
now. How do you encourage, I'm guessing, senior management to bring the solutions as opposed to telling them what you're doing? You want to continue to encourage ideas to create an innovative workplace.
This one was probably to the operations, Kevin, just when we were talking about, you know, telling them solutions, making them feel the pain, getting them to say yes, agree. You know, open-ended questions really encourage that conversation. I guess, how do you open that up to get them to bring the solutions to you instead of, you know, telling them?
Okay. And I was gearing it towards if you're presenting what you want to do, but a good way to do that is, hey, we've got this problem out here, and I've got some ideas, but we're going to be a lot better off if all of us just sit here and brainstorm a few ideas. So what I'm going to ask is you throw out a few ideas, I'm going to throw out a few ideas, and let's discuss them afterwards and figure out how we're going to tackle this problem we have with efficiencies or with costs or with safety or whatever it may be. So you want to say, I have some ideas. However, I'm not perfect. I think combined, though, we can get to a good solution together, and you create that camaraderie, that feeling of teamwork. And you're absolutely right that there are a lot of times you're doing that instead of just giving that solution. I was gearing this more towards where you have a solution that you want to present to somebody, and you want to get a call to action of some sort at the end.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kevin.
Does that answer your question okay? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
okay, thanks, Marissa. That's an excellent question. Okay, and getting back to your manager, you want to emphasize your departmental goals and present a clear plan for your manager. Highlight success stories on things you've done in the past if they don't know you as well. A lot of times you have a new manager, but make sure they know you have a track record of being able to do this and doing it well if you're asking for something that you want, especially if you're asking for budgetary dollars for anything. Use data with your manager and prepare for detailed questions, because if I'm a manager and you're asking me for something, I am going to ask you a lot of hard questions. Probably not as many hard questions as the plant manager or a general manager or the operations manager, but maybe so. But your manager will ask you a lot of questions because they're going to have to give up something and you're going to have to give them something in return. So be prepared to answer all those questions. Have some backup data that you can give and a lot of detail behind that, especially technical detail, because your manager probably understands the technical aspects of what you're doing more so than somebody in operations or in senior plant management. And your employees, when you're dealing with employees, you're getting to the what's in it for me right away, but you want to emphasize how it will simplify their job. How will it make it easier for them day to day? Will they get less trouble calls to go out to this production line and do this? Will it streamline the PM that they're doing? Will it make it easier for them to do paperwork? Will it be less paperwork? Less clicks of a mouse when they're doing something? Will they have to change this gearbox less often because you're going to a new seal on this gearbox and it'll last a lot longer and they don't have to lift this heavy gearbox out all the time? Or will it make it easier to move things around? So, how will it make their job simpler? How will it make them more efficient in their job? Encourage open discussion. You don't just tell them, hey, we're going to do this. Here's what we'd like to do. Wanted to talk to you guys about it. And that doesn't mean you're not going to stick to your guns and you don't plan on doing it regardless. But you want to hear their feedback, because a lot of times the people that are closest to it will come up with the things that you overlook. And that even comes to operators on a production line. I remember years ago when I was an electrical foreman, I was doing my initial walk through the lines to see what was going on at the beginning of shift. And the packer operator, the piece of equipment that put 24 bottles into a case and then sealed up the case, told me, hey, Kevin, come over here. I said, what's up? And he said, this machine just doesn't quite sound right. Listen to it. I know this machine and I couldn't hear a difference, but he's out there every single day. Just like your technicians are out there every single day. They have that gut feel. They know something. And we couldn't figure it out. I walked away. About 30, 45 minutes later, that Packer crashed and burned because that operator knew something wasn't right. We couldn't put our finger on it, but he knew. And your technicians know too. So get their feedback. They may say, you know, Kevin, we tried that 7 months ago, or we tried that 5 years ago, and it didn't work. Here's why. And you can avoid costly mistakes. And it shows your technicians, the people working for you, your engineers, or whoever's working for you, that you do listen to them. You want to outline clear implementation steps so they know what they're doing. It's outlining that path, just like I outlined the path at the beginning of this presentation. And you want to address potential challenges, especially if it's not going to be easy. You need to tell them this might be hard at first, but in the end, it's going to make your life easier because of this, this, and this. So you want to make sure they know the challenges up front. They don't get going on whatever you have them doing and say, you didn't tell me this was going to be a pain in the butt. And then ask them what they need from you to make this happen. And, you know, when we do this, is there anything you can think of that would make it easier for you that I can help? Can I run interference here? Can I get you this tool? Can I make sure we have all this? Can I make sure everything is staged in a certain area? What special tools do you need? What equipment do you need? What safety gear do you need? Whatever it is, make sure they have that and let them tell you what they need and that, and they'll be upfront, and your employees will appreciate you for that. So that pretty much covers what I had hoped to cover. I talked about establishing your speaking style. I talked about 5 basics in presenting. I talked about some of the nuances, some of the finer points that most people don't know, that if you use them subtly, you will get your audience listening to you a little bit more and more engaged. And then we talked a little bit about each of the different types of style that, or each of the types of position of person you would talk to, and how they differ just a little bit, but all of them get down to what's in it for me. Because like I said in the beginning, we are a very selfish society. So I am going to take this off of presentation mode and open it up for questions. I do have one final exercise after questions though.
Questions, folks? Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. I've got I do a little bit of presentations myself, and I've been busily taking a lot of notes. So it's been great for me. Questions, folks? Any questions for Kevin?
Yeah, I've got a question, Kevin. Sometimes I've heard other people who do a lot of speaking presentations, they talk about reading the room and just understanding sort of the vibe that's going on in the room at the time and then adjusting to that. What experiences or advice could you give us in that space?
That is an excellent point. And I do it a little bit differently. And it was Anthony that was speaking. Yeah. I always like to arrive ahead of time at live conferences. And even to the presentation before mine, I get to know the people and I get to feel the vibe in the room. I get to feel what they're doing. Or I will ask the person that is the event planner, or is there something I should be aware of? And I had a speaker friend of mine that went somewhere, and the person told them, you need to know that we just laid off 1/3 of our sales force last week. And this person was giving a sales presentation. And the person started right away, you know what? I realize you're going through a tough time right now, and a lot of your friends aren't here. I'm here to help you through that and teach you a few things.